Christmas morning at the Thompson family home in suburban Denver. I will 28 successful software engineer watched my parents hand my 24-year-old sister Emma a house key wrapped in red velvet. Dad beamed as he announced they bought her a three-bedroom colonial downtown worth $400,000. When I asked why Mom patted my shoulder saying, "You'll understand someday, honey," the room fell silent as I calmly reached for my gift to Dad, a thick manila envelope. Dad's confident smile dissolved into horror as he recognized the legal letterhead inside. The moment I saw that house key, everything clicked into place, like puzzle pieces I'd been trying to ignore for months. Those hushed phone calls that stopped when I entered rooms. The mysterious meetings my parents claimed were about holiday planning. Emma's sudden confidence about her future, despite working retail at Target and living in our basement since graduation. I'd been contributing $1,500 monthly to family expenses since college, helping pay the mortgage after Dad's construction business struggled during the recession. Or so they told me. Now watching Emma clutch that key like a golden ticket, I realized how naive I'd been. The suspicion started back in September when I overheard Dad on the phone discussing the will situation with someone. I'd assumed they meant my grandmother's will since she'd passed away in August. But sitting there on Christmas morning watching my sister's victorious expression, I understood they'd been talking about me personally, about how to handle Will Thompson, the reliable son who never questioned where his money went. Emma had always been the favorite. While I worked 2 jobs through college and graduated with $30,000 in student debt, she received full tuition payments and a new Honda Civic for her 18th birthday. I got a handshake and a lecture about responsibility. When she switched majors 3 times, extending her college experience to 6 years, my parents called it finding herself. When I asked for help with loan payments after graduation, they said I was capable of handling it myself. My sister Emma Thompson had studied fine arts with dreams of becoming a gallery curator, but those dreams evaporated when she realized the art world required networking and dedication. Instead, she settled into a comfortable routine of 20-hour work weeks and basement living, contributing nothing to household expenses while I covered her share. She was 24 beautiful in that effortless way that comes from never facing real consequences, with long auburn hair and green eyes that had always gotten her out of trouble. Robert Thompson. My father was 53 and owned Thompson Construction, a company he'd built from nothing in the 1990s. He stood 6 feet tall, with graying temples and calloused hands that testified to decades of physical labor. Dad believed in traditional gender roles where men provided and women needed protection. Emma fit his vision of femininity, perfectly delicate, artistic, requiring shelter from the harsh world. My mother, Linda Thompson, was 51, a former elementary school teacher who'd given up her career when Emma was born. She spent her days managing household affairs and making excuses for Emma's lack of direction. Mom had soft brown hair and kind eyes that masked a steel determination to ensure Emma never experienced discomfort or disappointment. The family dynamic had been established early. I was the capable one who'd figure things out independently. Emma was the precious one who needed constant support and protection. My parents viewed my competence as evidence that I required less love and attention, while Emma's struggles meant she deserved more resources and consideration. But competence, I'd learned, was both a blessing and a curse. The more capable I proved myself, the more responsibilities they piled on my shoulders. The more Emma struggled, the more they rescued her from natural consequences. I'd enabled this pattern by accepting it as normal family dynamics instead of recognizing it as favoritism. Last month, I'd overheard Emma talking to her boyfriend Tyler about her house money during Sunday dinner, then quickly changing the subject when she noticed my attention. At the time, I dismissed it as another one of Emma's fantasies about independence. She talked about getting her own place for years without ever taking concrete steps toward that goal. Now I realized it hadn't been fantasy at all. While I'd been sacrificing my own dreams of homeownership to support the family, my parents had been secretly planning to give Emma everything I'd been working toward. The envelope in my hands contained documentation I'd gathered over the past 6 weeks. Bank statements, loan applications, inheritance records, and financial agreements that painted a picture of systematic deception. I'd hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former police detective with 20 years of experience uncovering financial fraud. Webb had discovered that my parents took out a second mortgage on their family home to buy Emma's house using my monthly contributions as collateral proof for the bank loan. Essentially, they'd made me an unwitting co-signer for my sister's Christmas gift. The bank approved their loan application based on documentation showing consistent additional income from their adult son living at home income that demonstrated their ability to manage additional debt obligations. But that was just the beginning of what I'd uncovered. Dad's hands trembled slightly as he stared at the manila envelope. He knew exactly what legal letterhead meant, and his face had gone from Christmas morning joy to something approaching panic. I'd been planning this moment for weeks, documenting every lie and manipulation I'd discovered. The favoritism pattern went back decades, but I'd been too loyal to acknowledge its true scope. When Emma graduated high school, my parents bought her a brand new red Toyota Camry with leather seats and extended warranty coverage. When I graduated with honors and a full scholarship offer, I received a firm handshake and a lecture about becoming a man. They spent $12,000 on Emma's car, but wouldn't contribute $50 toward my graduation cap and gown rental. College continued the same pattern. Emma's tuition at Colorado State University cost $38,000 per year, fully covered by our parents, who proudly called her their little artist. My engineering degree at University of Colorado cost less due to my academic scholarships, but I still needed loans for room board and living expenses. When I asked for help, Dad explained that engineering would provide better financial returns, so I should view educational debt as an investment in my future earning potential. Emma changed majors from art history to studio arts to art therapy, finally settling on general fine arts after 6 years and $180,000 in parental investment. I graduated in 4 years with my computer science degree and immediately found work at a Denver software company starting at $65,000 annually. Instead of celebrating my success, my parents asked me to move back home temporarily to help with expenses while Dad's construction business recovered from the economic downturn. Temporarily became 5 years. My best friend Jake Morrison had witnessed much of this family dynamic over the years. Jake was a fellow engineer who'd graduated with me and now worked at a competing tech firm in Boulder. He'd tried multiple times to point out my parents' unfair treatment, but I'd always defended them with explanations about family loyalty and temporary circumstances. Sarah Walsh, my ex-girlfriend of 2 years, had been less diplomatic about my family situation. Sarah was a marketing coordinator with bright blonde hair and an MBA from Denver University. She'd grown increasingly frustrated with my financial obligations to my family, especially when those obligations prevented us from moving in together or planning for our own future. Sarah had wanted to get married and buy our own home, but I couldn't commit to a mortgage when I was already covering $1,500 monthly in family expenses. Your sister is 24 years old and perfectly capable of supporting herself, Sarah had argued during one of our final fights. Your parents are using your sense of responsibility to enable her dependence, and you're letting them do it because you're afraid of confronting them. Sarah left me 8 months ago, tired of competing with my family for my attention and resources. She'd been right about everything, but I hadn't been ready to hear it then. Now sitting in my childhood living room on Christmas morning, I finally understood what she'd been trying to tell me. My grandmother Margaret Thompson had passed away in August after a brief battle with pneumonia. She'd been 92 years old and sharp as a tack until the very end. Grandma Margaret had always treated Emma and me equally, never showing the favoritism that marked my parents' behavior. She'd been a Depression-era child who understood the value of hard work and personal responsibility. When Marcus Webb investigated the inheritance situation, he'd uncovered disturbing facts about the estate distribution. According to the original will filed with probate court, Grandma Margaret had left $100,000 to be split equally between her two grandchildren with explicit instructions that the money should help us achieve homeownership and financial independence. I'd been told my $50,000 portion was tied up in probate proceedings and would be available eventually. Meanwhile, Emma's portion had been immediately accessible and quietly transferred to our parents' control. Webb discovered that Dad, as power of attorney, had manipulated the estate distribution by claiming I was financially stable and didn't need immediate access to inheritance funds. The private investigator Marcus Webb was a compact man in his 50s with silver hair and knowing eyes that had seen every kind of deception during his police career. Webb specialized in family financial fraud cases and charged reasonable rates for thorough investigations. He'd spent 3 weeks documenting my family's financial activities, interviewing relevant parties, and gathering evidence that painted a clear picture of systematic manipulation. Attorney Jennifer Rodriguez had been my grandmother's original estate lawyer, a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in elder law and probate disputes. Rodriguez confirmed that the will had been modified after my grandmother's death with signatures that didn't match her usual handwriting patterns. She suspected forgery but needed additional evidence to pursue legal action. Bank manager David Foster at Colorado Community Bank had been extremely helpful once I explained my situation and provided proper identification. Foster confirmed that my parents had used documentation of my monthly contributions as income verification for Emma's home loan. They'd represented my payments as rental income from adult son, rather than temporary family assistance, inflating their apparent financial stability for mortgage approval purposes. Webb's investigation revealed that Emma had known about the inheritance manipulation from the beginning. 3 months ago, she'd let slip during Sunday dinner that she was excited about finally getting her house money, before quickly changing the subject when she realized I was listening. At the time, I'd assumed she was talking about saving for a future down payment. Now I understood she'd been counting inheritance money that was rightfully half mine. The manila envelope contained copies of forged documents, bank records showing improper fund transfers, and recorded conversations where my parents discussed their plans for managing the will problem. I'd been secretly recording family discussions for 6 weeks, building a comprehensive case that would be difficult to deny or explain away. But the inheritance theft was just one piece of a larger puzzle that involved criminal fraud, tax evasion, and systematic financial manipulation that could destroy my entire family's future. Dad's confident Christmas morning demeanor crumbled completely as he recognized the inheritance paperwork spilling from my envelope. His construction-weathered hands shook as he picked up copies of documents he thought were safely hidden in his home office filing cabinet. Mom stopped smiling for the first time all morning, her maternal instincts finally sensing real danger to her carefully constructed family narrative. Webb's investigation had revealed layers of deception that went far beyond simple favoritism or inheritance manipulation. Dad's construction business wasn't just struggling during economic recovery, it had been hemorrhaging money for 3 years, while he used increasingly desperate measures to maintain the appearance of stability and success. Thompson Construction owed suppliers over $90,000 in unpaid invoices. Dad had been rotating payments between creditors, paying just enough to avoid immediate legal action while building enormous debt obligations that threatened to collapse everything. He'd been borrowing against equipment selling tools and even taking money from client escrow accounts to cover operating expenses and family costs. The monthly $1,500 I contributed wasn't going toward household expenses as promised. Instead, my parents had been depositing those payments into a secret savings account specifically designated for Emma's future mortgage obligations. While I'd been sacrificing my own apartment dreams to help with family finances, they'd been stockpiling my money to fund my sister's independent lifestyle. David Foster had provided detailed banking records showing the paper trail of financial manipulation. My contributions had been systematically redirected from family expenses to Emma's benefit, while Dad covered actual household costs through increasingly risky business borrowing and questionable financial practices. Marcus Webb had interviewed several construction industry contacts who confirmed Thompson Construction's deteriorating reputation and financial instability. Suppliers demanded cash payments in advance. Clients complained about project delays and quality issues. Dad's business insurance had lapsed due to non-payment, making every job site a liability nightmare waiting to happen. Attorney Jennifer Rodriguez had discovered that Dad's power of attorney privileges over Grandma Margaret's estate had been systematically abused. He'd not only manipulated the inheritance distribution, but had also borrowed against estate assets before probate completion, using Grandma's property as collateral for loans that funded Emma's house down payment. The forgery was sophisticated but detectable under expert analysis. Dad had practiced Grandma's signature, repeatedly creating documents that revised her will to favor Emma while minimizing my inheritance access. Rodriguez had handwriting analysis performed by forensic experts who confirmed the signatures were fraudulent. Emma's complicity ran deeper than I'd initially suspected. She'd been actively involved in planning the deception, not just passively benefiting from parental favoritism. Webb had obtained copies of text messages between Emma and Tyler Brooks, her unemployed musician boyfriend, where they discussed spending Will's inheritance money on furniture and vacation plans once the house purchase was finalized. Tyler Brooks was 26 years old, tall and lean, with shoulder-length brown hair and an inability to maintain steady employment. He played guitar in a band called Midnight Rebellion that performed at local bars twice monthly for minimal pay. Tyler had been living rent-free in Emma's new house since the purchase, treating it like his personal bachelor pad, while contributing nothing to household expenses or mortgage payments. Tyler had been bragging around Denver's music scene about his girlfriend's family taking care of everything and how they'd figured out how to get a free house through family manipulation. He'd told multiple people that Emma's older brother was too successful for his own good and needed to learn about sharing the wealth with family members who deserved it more. Uncle Tom Thompson, Dad's younger brother, had tried to warn me about Robert's deteriorating business judgment 6 months ago. Tom owned a successful plumbing company and frequently collaborated with Dad on construction projects. He'd noticed Dad's increasing desperation, poor decision-making, and ethical corners being cut to maintain cash flow and project schedules. Tom had approached me privately during Emma's birthday dinner in October, suggesting that Dad might be facing financial problems more serious than anyone realized. At the time, I dismissed Tom's concerns as sibling rivalry and business competition. Now I realized Tom had been trying to protect me from becoming collateral damage in Dad's financial collapse. Family accountant Helen Wright had been complicit in facilitating fraudulent paperwork and tax document manipulation. Wright was a small practice CPA who'd handled Thompson family finances for 15 years. She'd helped Dad create false income statements, inflate asset valuations, and hide debt obligations to qualify for Emma's home loan. Wright had also assisted with inheritance document modification, providing professional credibility to forged signatures and suspicious financial transfers. Her involvement made the fraud more sophisticated and harder to detect, but also elevated potential criminal charges from simple family dispute to professional conspiracy involving licensed financial professionals. The investigation had uncovered a long-term manipulation strategy that extended far beyond Emma's house purchase. Dad had been planning to transfer Thompson Construction's mounting debts to my personal responsibility, while protecting Emma's assets and financial security. They intended to use family loyalty and guilt about abandoning my father's legacy to pressure me into accepting business ownership, along with all associated liabilities and obligations. The recorded conversations in my envelope captured Dad discussing this debt transfer plan with Mom and Helen Wright. They'd calculated that my engineering salary and credit rating could support the business debt load if I agreed to become majority owner and primary financial guarantor. Meanwhile, Emma would maintain her house ownership free and clear, protected from any business-related financial consequences. But I'd already filed fraud charges with the district attorney's office 3 weeks ago, initiating criminal proceedings that would expose the entire network of deception and hold everyone accountable for their roles in systematic financial manipulation designed to destroy my future while protecting Emma's comfort. Mom immediately went into damage control mode while Dad sat in stunned silence, still clutching the evidence of his fraudulent activities. Her voice took on that familiar pleading tone she'd always used when trying to smooth over family conflicts, but this time her words revealed a twisted logic that had guided decades of unfair treatment. "Will, honey, you have to understand." Mom began wringing her hands nervously as she glanced between Dad's pale face and my calm expression. "We gave Emma the house because she needs more help than you do. You've always been so capable, so independent. We knew you'd figure things out on your own, but Emma requires more support and guidance to succeed in life." Dad finally found his voice, though it cracked with defensive anger. "You would have wasted that inheritance money on some apartment rental instead of making a real investment," he said, jutting his chin forward in that stubborn way I remembered from childhood arguments. "Emma's house is property ownership, something permanent and valuable. We were protecting your grandmother's money by ensuring it went towards something meaningful and lasting." Their reasoning exposed the fundamental flaw in how they'd always viewed their children. They decided I was strong enough to handle adversity, while Emma was too delicate for life's challenges. My competence became justification for giving me less support, while Emma's struggles meant she deserved more resources and consideration. "We had a plan." Mom continued, her voice gaining confidence as she outlined their long-term manipulation strategy. "Emma would own her house free and clear, providing her with stability and security. You would inherit Dad's construction business once you were ready to take over, and everyone would end up with equal value in the long run." Dad nodded enthusiastically, apparently convinced their scheme made perfect sense. "The construction company has real potential once the economy fully recovers," he said, conveniently ignoring the massive debt obligations and failing reputation that came with business ownership. "You'd be inheriting decades of hard work and established client relationships that are worth far more than $50,000 in cash." Emma emerged from the kitchen where she'd been hiding during the initial confrontation, her green eyes flashing with indignation and her auburn hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that made her look younger than her 24 years. She'd clearly been listening to everything and decided to join the family defense strategy. "Will's being completely selfish about this whole situation," Emma declared, crossing her arms and glaring at me with righteous anger. "You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad care about my happiness. And now you're trying to destroy Christmas just because you can't stand seeing me succeed for once in my life." Tyler Brooks chose that moment to swagger into the living room, apparently confident that his presence would somehow improve the situation. At 6'2", with unkempt brown hair and wearing a faded band t-shirt, Tyler carried himself with the entitled arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. "This is ridiculous," Tyler announced, as if his opinion carried weight in family financial matters. "Emma deserves that house after everything she's been through, and you should be supporting your sister instead of trying to take away her security and stability. You make good money as an engineer, so you don't need inheritance money like she does." I'd been recording this entire conversation on my phone, gathering additional evidence for legal proceedings while watching my family reveal their true attitudes about fairness, responsibility, and financial manipulation. Their words confirmed every suspicion Webb's investigation had uncovered about their fundamental disrespect for my rights and contributions. Emma's voice rose to a near shriek as she realized I wasn't backing down from my position. "I'm pregnant with Tyler's baby," she announced dramatically, placing her hand on her flat stomach for emphasis. I need that house more than you need some stupid inheritance money that you wouldn't even spend responsibly anyway. Police officer James Anderson arrived within minutes, called by neighbors who'd heard shouting through the windows of our suburban home. Anderson was a patient man in his 40s who'd clearly handled numerous domestic disputes and family financial arguments. He listened calmly while taking notes about the situation and ensuring everyone remained civil and non-threatening. Tyler immediately became aggressive when police arrived, apparently viewing law enforcement as a challenge to his authority and dominance. "This is family business that doesn't concern outsiders," he told Anderson with obvious hostility. "Will's just mad because his sister got something nice for once, and he's trying to cause problems for everyone else." Dad tried one final guilt manipulation, threatening to disown me if I didn't abandon legal action and accept their financial manipulation as normal family dynamics. "I've worked hard my entire life to build something for my children." He said, his voice heavy with manufactured emotion and wounded pride. "If you destroy everything I've built just out of spite and jealousy, then you're no son of mine." Mom begged me to think about family unity and consider how legal action would affect everyone's reputation and standing in the community. She painted my pursuit of justice as selfish destruction that would tear apart everything she'd worked to create for our family's happiness and stability. But lawyer Michael Stevens had been listening to the entire confrontation through a live conference call on my phone. Stevens was a sharp criminal defense attorney in his 50s who specialized in financial fraud cases and family theft situations. He'd been monitoring the conversation for additional evidence while preparing immediate legal responses to any threats or escalating conflicts. The conversation had provided perfect documentation of their conspiracy manipulation tactics and complete disregard for my financial rights and personal autonomy. Stevens confirmed we now had enough evidence to pursue both criminal charges and civil damages that could recover far more than the original inheritance amount. I revealed that I'd already contacted Emma's mortgage company about the fraudulent income documentation used to secure her home loan. Wells Fargo was now conducting an investigation that could result in the loan being called due immediately, forcing Emma to either find alternative financing or face foreclosure proceedings within 60 days of notification. Tyler's face went white when he realized his free housing situation was about to evaporate, along with his plans to profit from selling Emma's house to pay his mounting gambling debts that I'd discovered during Webb's investigation. Emma's pregnancy announcement hung in the air like a desperate lie everyone could see through, but she doubled down on the manipulation instead of backing away from the obvious deception. Her face flushed red with anger and embarrassment as she realized her dramatic revelation hadn't produced the intended guilt and sympathy from me or the police officer documenting our family implosion. "Fine, I'm not pregnant yet," she admitted with a defiant toss of her auburn hair. "But Tyler and I are planning to start a family soon, so I really do need that house for our future children." "You're trying to take away my baby's security and stability just because you're jealous of my relationship and happiness." Tyler's true character emerged fully as he realized his comfortable living situation was threatened. He stepped closer to me with obvious aggressive intent, his hands clenched into fists, and his voice rising to a threatening volume that made Officer Anderson immediately move between us. "You think you're better than everyone else because you have some college degree and office job?" Tyler snarled, his face twisted with resentment and entitlement. "Emma's family has been taking care of her whole life, and now you want to destroy that just because you're bitter about being alone and unsuccessful with women." Tyler's gambling debts were owed to dangerous people connected to Denver's underground betting scene. Webb's investigation had revealed Tyler owed $37,000 to loan sharks who were growing impatient with his payment delays and excuses. Tyler had been counting on selling Emma's house to pay these debts, viewing her family's gift as his personal salvation from serious physical consequences. Dad's construction company finances were even worse than I'd initially discovered. Thompson Construction owed over $200,000 to suppliers, subcontractors, and equipment rental companies throughout Colorado. Dad had been juggling payments and making empty promises while hoping for large contracts that would solve his cash flow problems and restore business stability. The plan to transfer business ownership to me had been carefully calculated to protect Dad's remaining assets, while making me responsible for all debt obligations and legal liabilities. He'd intended to retire comfortably, while I struggled with the financial consequences of his poor business decisions and questionable ethical practices. I built that company from nothing. Dad said, his voice heavy with self-righteous indignation, as he tried to justify decades of financial mismanagement and recent criminal activities. I was going to give you the opportunity to continue our family legacy and build something meaningful instead of just working for someone else your whole life. Helen Wright, the family accountant, had received immunity from prosecution in exchange for testifying about the conspiracy and providing documentation about tax evasion, insurance fraud, and systematic client trust fund theft that Dad had committed to maintain cash flow and business operations. Wright revealed that Dad had been stealing from construction client escrow accounts for 18 months, using money intended for materials and subcontractor payments to cover personal expenses and Emma's house down payment. This elevated the charges from simple family financial manipulation to federal crimes involving client trust fund violations and interstate financial fraud. Emma's employment situation at Target was also more precarious than anyone realized. She'd been lying to her employer about family financial support affecting her benefit allegations and tax withholding calculations. Her supervisor, Maria Gonzalez, had been asking questions about Emma's sudden ability to purchase expensive items on a retail salary that barely covered basic living expenses. Emma had also been using sick days and personal leave to meet with real estate agents, mortgage brokers, and furniture stores, claiming family emergencies while actually planning her house purchase and decorating plans. Target's Human Resources Department was reviewing her employment record for potential policy violations and fraudulent leave usage. Tyler's threats escalated when Officer Anderson tried to de-escalate the situation through calm conversation and conflict resolution techniques. Tyler apparently viewed police intervention as weakness and continued making aggressive statements about what he'd do to me if I didn't back down from legal action against Emma and her family. "You're going to drop all this legal nonsense and let Emma keep her house," Tyler declared with obvious menace. "Or you'll regret causing problems for people who deserve better than your selfishness and jealousy. I know where you work and where you live, so think carefully about your next moves." These threats constituted criminal intimidation and potential extortion charges that Officer Anderson documented carefully in his incident report. Tyler's behavior provided additional evidence of the conspiracy to defraud me, while using threats and manipulation to prevent me from seeking legal remedies for financial crimes. Michael Stevens instructed me through our phone connection to clearly state that I was recording everything for legal purposes and that any additional threats would result in immediate restraining orders and additional criminal charges against all parties involved in the conspiracy. This conversation is being recorded for legal documentation. I announced calmly, holding up my phone so everyone could see the active recording application. "My attorney has been listening to everything, and any additional threats or intimidation attempts will result in immediate legal consequences." Dad's face went completely pale as he realized the full scope of evidence I'd gathered and the seriousness of criminal charges he was facing. Mom started crying as she finally understood that their manipulation and deception had crossed legal boundaries that could result in prison time and complete financial destruction. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Webb's investigation had uncovered evidence that Dad had been planning to fake his own death through a construction accident, allowing him to escape his debts while leaving me responsible for business obligations and Emma financially secure through life insurance proceeds and property ownership. This suicide fraud plan involved insurance manipulation, criminal conspiracy, and attempted obstruction of justice, that would elevate all charges to felony levels with mandatory minimum prison sentences for everyone involved in the deception. The room fell completely silent as I calmly explained the comprehensive legal strategy I'd spent 2 months developing with precision and professional guidance. Every family member realized simultaneously that this wasn't an emotional outburst or temporary anger. This was a calculated response to systematic financial abuse that had been building toward this moment for years. I'm not pursuing criminal fraud charges out of spite or revenge, I said, my voice steady and matter of fact, as I watched their faces register the true scope of their legal exposure. I'm holding you accountable for crimes you committed against me and other victims while protecting future targets from similar financial manipulation and theft. Webb's investigation had uncovered that Dad's construction business financial problems extended far beyond family manipulation. Thompson Construction had been stealing from client escrow accounts, overcharging customers for materials while using inferior products and avoiding required inspections through bribery and code violation concealment that endangered public safety. IRS agent Patricia Murray had been investigating Thompson Construction for 3 years, based on anonymous tips about tax evasion, unreported cash income, and suspicious expense deductions that didn't match business activity patterns. Dad had been claiming Emma's house purchase as a business expense, while reporting my monthly contributions as rental income, creating multiple layers of tax fraud that carried severe federal penalties. The construction company's client victim list included elderly homeowners who'd been charged for work that was never completed, young families who'd received substandard construction that created safety hazards, and small business owners who'd paid deposits for projects that were abandoned when Dad moved to higher-paying opportunities. Construction company creditor representatives had been meeting with bankruptcy attorneys to discuss forced liquidation of Thompson Construction assets to recover outstanding debts that now exceeded $300,000 in verified claims. Dad's attempts to transfer assets to Emma and hide money from creditors constituted fraudulent conveyance that could void all recent financial transactions. Real estate attorney Karen Phillips was handling the forced sale of Emma's house as proceeds from criminal activity that needed to be returned to defrauded clients and creditors. The house purchase had been funded through stolen client payments, fraudulent loans, and manipulated inheritance money that created multiple legal claims against the property. Tyler's gambling debts were owed to associates of organized crime figures who'd been using violence and intimidation to collect outstanding obligations throughout the Denver metropolitan area. Tyler had been planning to disappear with Emma once they sold her house, leaving her to face the consequences of his financial problems and criminal associations. Emma's house will be seized within 30 days. I explained, watching Tyler's face drain of color as his escape plan crumbled. The mortgage company has already initiated foreclosure proceedings based on fraudulent loan application documents, and federal prosecutors need the property as evidence for criminal trials. Dad had been systematically destroying construction business records to hide evidence of client theft, tax evasion, and safety code violations that could result in manslaughter charges if any of his substandard work had caused injuries or deaths. Document destruction constituted additional obstruction of justice charges with mandatory minimum sentences. Mom's therapy sessions with Dr. Amanda Foster had been court-ordered as part of her plea agreement for conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Dr. Foster specialized in family dynamics and financial abuse patterns, helping Mom understand how her enabling behavior had created the toxic family environment that led to criminal activity. Webb had documented years of financial abuse patterns that constituted elder abuse against my grandmother, child financial exploitation during my college years, and systematic theft that qualified for organized crime penalties due to the sophisticated nature of the conspiracy and multiple victim involvement. I've accepted a job offer in Seattle at Microsoft. I announced watching my family realize they were losing their primary financial resource permanently. I'll be moving across country in 6 weeks to start fresh without any connection to the situation or ongoing financial obligations to any of you. The Seattle position offered a salary increase to $130,000 annually plus stock options and relocation assistance that would allow me to finally pursue homeownership and financial independence without family manipulation or guilt-based obligations to support Emma's lifestyle choices and Tyler's criminal associations. My new life in Seattle represented complete freedom from family financial manipulation, emotional guilt tactics, and responsibility for enabling Emma's dependence on others for basic life needs and decision-making. I'd been secretly interviewing for 3 months while building my legal case, preparing for total separation from toxic family relationships. I'm offering you one final choice, I said, pulling out a formal settlement agreement that Michael Stevens had prepared for this moment. You can cooperate with returning my inheritance plus damages, accept plea bargains for reduced sentences, and begin making restitution to all the clients you've stolen from. The alternative was full criminal prosecution that would result in federal prison sentences, complete asset forfeiture bankruptcy proceedings that would leave everyone financially destroyed, and civil lawsuits from multiple victims that could continue for decades with wage garnishments and property seizures. Dad would face 15 to 25 years in federal prison for client trust fund theft, tax evasion, construction fraud, and elder abuse charges related to Grandma's estate manipulation. Mom would receive 5 to 10 years for conspiracy and money laundering through her involvement in hiding stolen funds and facilitating fraudulent transactions. Emma faced criminal charges for inheritance fraud, mortgage fraud, and conspiracy that could result in 3 to 7 years imprisonment, plus civil liability for damages to all the clients who'd been defrauded to fund her house purchase and lifestyle support. Tyler's gambling debt situation would resolve itself through criminal prosecution for extortion, intimidation, and association with organized crime figures involved in illegal gambling operations throughout Colorado and neighboring states. The settlement offer required full cooperation with criminal investigations, complete asset disclosure for restitution calculations, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing for victim impact statements, and permanent restraining orders preventing any future contact or financial manipulation attempts against me. 3 months later, I sat in my new apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, surrounded by moving boxes and feeling genuinely happy for the first time in years. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of Elliott Bay, and my morning coffee routine included watching ferries cross the water while planning my day without any family financial obligations or guilt-based manipulation tactics. Dad had accepted a plea bargain that included 18 months in minimum security federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation with community service requirements focused on financial literacy education for small business owners. He'd pled guilty to tax evasion, client trust fund theft, and elder financial abuse, receiving a lighter sentence in exchange for full cooperation and complete asset disclosure for restitution purposes. Thompson Construction had been liquidated through bankruptcy proceedings that recovered enough money to provide partial restitution to defrauded clients and creditors. Dad now worked for Uncle Tom's Plumbing Company as a basic installer, earning $17 per hour while learning humility and accepting supervision from his younger brother, who'd always managed finances responsibly and ethically. Emma's house had been repossessed by Wells Fargo within 60 days of my legal action, forcing her to move back into our parents' basement bedroom, with a newfound appreciation for the financial support she'd always taken for granted. The foreclosure process had been swift once federal investigators proved the loan application contained fraudulent income documentation and stolen money for the down payment. Tyler Brooks had disappeared from Denver completely when he realized his free housing situation was ending, and his gambling debt collectors were becoming increasingly aggressive about payment collection methods. Emma discovered Tyler had stolen her jewelry, electronics, and car before vanishing, leaving her to face the consequences of his criminal associations and financial irresponsibility alone. Mom had begun individual therapy with Dr. Amanda Foster to address her enabling patterns and understand how her differential treatment of children had created the dysfunctional family dynamics that led to criminal behavior. Dr. Foster specialized in family financial abuse and helped Mom recognize how her protection of Emma had actually harmed both of her children through unfair treatment and stunted emotional development. Emma herself had been forced to find full-time employment at a Denver marketing firm after Target terminated her position for fraudulent leave usage and policy violations. Working 45 hours weekly for the first time in her life, Emma was learning basic financial responsibility and independent skills while living under strict budget constraints that didn't allow for impulse purchases or entertainment spending. The criminal proceedings had been emotionally difficult, but ultimately healing for our entire family. Emma wrote me a genuine apology letter, acknowledging her selfishness, manipulation tactics, and willingness to participate in illegal activities rather than develop personal responsibility and work ethic. Her letter demonstrated real growth and understanding of how her behavior had hurt everyone involved. Dad's apology had been more complex, involving recognition of his fundamental misunderstanding of fair treatment and parental obligations. He admitted that viewing my competence as reason to burden me with more responsibilities while protecting Emma from natural consequences had been profoundly wrong and damaging to both children's development and relationship with each other. My grandmother's inheritance had been fully recovered with interest and penalties totaling $73,000 that I'd used as a down payment on a beautiful two-bedroom condominium in Seattle's Queen Anne district. The condo featured modern appliances, hardwood floors, and a balcony overlooking the city skyline that reminded me daily of my newfound freedom and independence. My job at Microsoft involved leading a team of software developers working on cloud computing infrastructure that would improve data security and accessibility for millions of users worldwide. The work was challenging and meaningful, providing intellectual stimulation and career growth opportunities that had been impossible while managing family financial crises and emotional manipulation. Dating in Seattle had been a revelation after years of relationships complicated by family financial obligations and guilt-based manipulation. I was seeing Amanda Chen, a brilliant marketing manager who respected my boundaries and appreciated my independence without trying to compete with family loyalty or financial responsibilities that drained my emotional energy and limited my availability for relationship building. Amanda was 29 years old with a master's degree in business administration and a successful career at a renewable energy startup. She understood healthy family relationships and financial boundaries, having grown up in a family that treated all children equally and encouraged independence rather than dependence on parental financial support for basic life needs. I'd started an online support group for young adults, facing family financial manipulation and inheritance theft, connecting with hundreds of people who'd experienced similar patterns of favoritism, guilt-based obligation, and systematic financial abuse from family members who viewed their success as justification for increased financial responsibility toward less capable siblings or relatives. The support group met weekly through video calls where members shared experiences, strategies for setting boundaries, and legal resources for addressing financial abuse that often went unrecognized by law enforcement and family court systems. Many members had been told they were selfish for wanting equal treatment or fair distribution of family resources and financial obligations. My story had been featured in several financial abuse awareness publications and legal journals as an example of how systematic family financial manipulation could escalate to federal crimes when enabled by family members who prioritized comfort over accountability and fairness over personal growth and development. The long-term impact of holding my family accountable had been overwhelmingly positive for everyone involved, even though the immediate consequences had been painful and disruptive to established patterns of behavior and financial dependence that had seemed normal but were actually deeply dysfunctional and harmful. Emma was developing genuine self-confidence and independence for the first time in her adult life. Learning that she was capable of supporting herself financially and making responsible decisions without constant parental intervention and protection from natural consequences of her choices and actions. Dad had learned that true success meant building something sustainable and ethical, rather than maintaining appearances through increasingly desperate financial manipulation and criminal activity that ultimately destroyed everything he'd claimed to be protecting for his family's future security and stability. Mom's therapy progress included recognition that protecting Emma from challenges and difficulties had prevented her from developing resilience work ethic and problem-solving skills that were essential for adult independence and healthy relationships with others who expected mutual respect and equal contribution to shared responsibilities. Our family relationships now operated on foundations of honesty, equality, and respect, rather than manipulation, guilt, and financial exploitation disguised as family loyalty and traditional values that had actually been toxic patterns passed down through generations of dysfunctional family dynamics. I maintained limited contact with my family through monthly phone calls and annual visits during neutral holidays that didn't carry emotional manipulation or expectation of financial contribution to family expenses or Emma's lifestyle choices and financial irresponsibility. The most important lesson I'd learned was that true family love required respect, equality, and accountability rather than blind loyalty and financial sacrifice that enabled harmful behavior and prevented personal growth for everyone involved in the dysfunctional patterns. Standing up for myself hadn't destroyed my family as they'd predicted during our Christmas confrontation. Instead, it had forced everyone to face reality, accept responsibility for their choices, and begin building healthier relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation and manipulation tactics that had damaged all of us over many years. Seattle's coffee culture, outdoor recreation opportunities, and thriving tech community provided the perfect environment for building a new life free from toxic family dynamics, while maintaining connections with people who chose to grow and change rather than continuing destructive patterns of behavior that hurt everyone involved. Have you ever faced a situation where family members treated you unfairly because they thought you could handle more responsibility than others? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself when it meant confronting people you loved? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to help others find it who might be struggling with similar family financial manipulation. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming toxic family dynamics and building healthy boundaries that protect your financial and emotional well-being. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from learning about family financial abuse patterns and legal resources for protecting yourself from inheritance theft and systematic financial exploitation disguised as family obligation and traditional values. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting others who are working to break free from toxic family patterns that prevent personal growth and healthy relationships. I hope my experience encourages you to prioritize your own well-being and demand equal treatment from family members who truly love and respect you as an individual deserving of fair treatment and genuine support. Remember that you deserve relationships based on equality and respect, not guilt and financial exploitation that benefits others at your expense, while preventing you from achieving your own dreams and goals for financial independence and personal happiness.